Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys. It sound right, boys.
Right on, writers, and welcome first-time viewers to the Books by Adrian author platform and our flagship show, Livestream Sunday. We're back. It's the Season 4 premiere. I'm so excited to have you with us. I'm also, for some reason, very nervous, even though I just did a live stream last week. I don't know. There's something special about Livestream Sunday for me. If you are new, my name is Adrian Santiago. I'll be your host today and every Sunday from here for the next 15 episodes. So for the next 15 weeks, with the exception of like Easter Sunday and Mother's Day, we have shows lined up all the way down. Okay, so for Season 4 of Livestream Sunday after today, 15 episodes. The entire playlist is available down below so that you can keep up and maybe even set reminders for all the episodes you don't want to miss, which is every episode, by the way. I thank each and every one of you for all of your time and support. Thank you so much for being here. First off, hit that subscribe button. If you are new, switch on notifications. And if you're not new and you haven't done those things yet, please do those. Don't forget to leave a like on the stream. And you know what? I gotta shout out my boy, because before the show had even started, he was letting people know what's up. Like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to wish Robert a happy birthday. We're gonna get to him in just a minute. Doing this helps the channel reach more people and to grow. And if you didn't make it to the live show and you're watching this on the replay, take a moment to leave a comment down below telling us your favorite comic book or comic book character and a little bit about why. Maybe there's a personal story involved. Today's episode will feature 3 short segments, totaling out to a 1-hour runtime. We'll begin with a short talk on comics and our guests' experience working on them, and then we're going to move into the proper interview. Throughout the show, please label any questions for Robert with a big Q, and I think that I have a prompt for that. Or I should. Anyway, big Q, so that I can easily find it later and throw it up onto the screen when it's time to talk to Robert about you guys. Okay, let's go ahead and switch over here. Our guest today is Robert Jones. Let's talk a little bit. So the great and powerful Robert Jones, also known on the internet as StoryDtechtive, he's a creator with a storied career from inking comics to writing them and beyond. And as AuthorTube was just taking shape, he was one of the pioneers on the platform and set the example for much of what AuthorTube is today. Let's take a stroll down all the avenues this man has laid bricks for. Please help me to welcome to the show our friend Robert Jones. Robert, welcome to the show.
Hey, everybody.
Go ahead and take a moment, introduce yourself to everybody. Let us know who you are, where you're from, and what you're working on right now.
Well, my name is Robert Jones, and my channel is The StoryDtechtive, and we take all aspects of story, put them under a Sherlockian microscope, and break down the craft to make your craft journey easier. I do tech reviews, and I'm working on a new batch of scripts for the channel, so soon.
Awesome. I'm so happy to have you here, man. I look very forward to talking to you about so many things. One of the great things about having a sort of friendly rival on AuthorTube in Barrett Laurie with his interviews is that when he gets to the good ones first, I can then go somewhere else with the interview. So that's kind of where I'm coming from today. We're going to ask questions that Barrett didn't ask, and because that way you can go in and see Barrett's interview and get that out of it, and come to my interview and get something else completely different out of it. So that's the goal for today. Now, before we dive into all of that, since I just mentioned Barrett, let's go ahead and take a look at the chat because it is hopping. First of all, Barrett was first through the door, followed very swiftly by Miss Ward here. Scott was also one of the first ones in before the show had even started. Barrett Jones doing his duty. I love it. Okay, Amelia. Welcome, Amelia. Welcome. Chris, what's up, guys? Once again, congratulations on your marriage. You guys keep sharing those beautiful wedding pictures, and it feels like the wedding is just never going to end. I love it. A bit sick of Barrett Lloyd having a stinking cold. I also have a stinking cold. It's actually not a cold. It's a sinus infection. Luckily, it is not COVID. I took a test. I know it's not COVID, but it's a sinus infection, which means that I need antibiotics and stuff before I'm going to start feeling better. So I am waiting to see my doctor, whose waiting list is apparently very, very long. Hello, doll. Hello. Okay, who else is new in the chat here? I'm going to scroll down and say, okay, I think we're caught up with everybody who's here. Hello, everybody. Welcome. And let's see here. Let's go ahead and dive into the first segment today, which is the Talk About Comics. All right. Now, today's topic of discussion is comic books, Mr. Jones. Mm-hmm. And what were some of the lessons that you learned from your days inking and drawing comics that still help you with your writing and storytelling today?
The sequential art aspect of it. I actually studied at the Joe Kubert School, and Joe Kubert, who is sadly no longer with us, was one of the pioneers for sequential art and storytelling in the medium. And there were lots of parallels. Like a lot of the things that he requested go in a panel is what would go in a paragraph. So it's a different format, but the storytelling is universal. You're good at the flow or you're not good at the flow, but it's all a learning experience.
Now, you say sequential storytelling, and of course, I'm thinking of the panels and the way that they draw your eye.
Exactly.
How exactly does that like translate for you in, like, let's say, the narrative of prose of a novel?
Well, like I said, a panel and a paragraph is the same. So you want to end your paragraph much the same way a panel does to lead the eye, where you're coming up with something that's going to lead into the next and the next, what's going to make it intriguing to keep going. How are you treating your initial subject or view that's within that paragraph, and how does that translate to everything that follows? So it's always sequential, and one thing always kind of builds or points to the next.
Right on. Okay, so excuse me. Barrett's interview, you told stories about working with Alan Moore, mm-hmm. and shared a tidbit that he writes everything on a typewriter, no computer, which was awesome to learn. I didn't know that. Which is a step beyond what George R.R. Martin does, right? Who famously writes on like this ancient computer, mm-hmm. that doesn't hook up to the internet so that nothing gets leaked, but also so there's no distractions either. The machine does one thing, it writes novels, right? So my question is, what are some other funny, quirky, weird, or absurd practices carried out by famous writers or even artists, actually, now that I think of it, practices that make you say, he does what? You know, like... what do you got?
I don't know if you would call it absurd. I mean, everybody has a similar style and everybody tries.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I think it's all about experimenting. Yeah. There's a story about Chuck Dixon. He was at a convention, and a fan came up and asked if he could come to his house and watch him write, as if watching him was going to somehow absorb all that knowledge. And Chuck Dixon's response is, first of all, no, you can't come to my house. And secondly, you're going to see me stare at the blank wall, write a little bit, stare at the wall some more.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we all do.
Well, you know, writing is such a private, process, right? Like, it's just so isolated and like most of us need,
Mhm.
even to just be away from people to do it.
Now that some of the techniques that Saul Stein used as my mentor and as somebody who'd been around for a while was pretty revolutionary in that it was almost a little metaphysical and playing the subconscious mind. He was always very concerned about its beginnings and endings because those are two really important parts of any novel.
Sure.
And before going to bed, whatever he was having trouble with, he would ask himself, how can I improve my beginning? How can I improve my ending? And then he said, waking up and letting his subconscious work through all that while he slept, often he would have an answer in the morning. And like everybody else, he said he would get his best answers while shaving or in the shower and doing things that occupied his physical body and allowed his imagination to get free and get out of his own way.
Yeah, that makes sense. The same. Yeah, that's so funny how we all have like these little like things that we do to make it work.
It's
I
like
love
they
it.
say go for a walk, but it could be almost anything. You could be washing dishes and doing something very mundane, but you'll come
Yeah.
up with this great idea because suddenly you are getting out of your own way.
I mean, that's the whole like idea behind like float tanks and sensory deprivation tanks, right? You
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
free yourself of any input whatsoever so that your imagination can just explode.
Yep.
Fun stuff, fun stuff. Okay, thank you very, very much. The comics topic is going to permeate the rest of the show. It's going to keep going. I just wanted to kind of get those two big questions out of the way there. And we're going to switch over into the interview. But first, I have sort of a commercial break of sorts. If this is your first time with us and you don't know anything yet about Books by Adrian, here's your welcome. Alrighty, so let's get in it here with the interview, Mr. Jones. As a soft transition of sorts, you mentioned having made comic-related content on your channel and it's sort of flopping, so to speak. What lessons were learned there, and do you have plans to return to comic book content in some other fashion in the future?
I might. When I made the content, I think I misread what some people wanted to hear. I think they wanted to hear my personal stories about the industry rather than comic book characters in general. But when I made the content, I tried to take the other form of storytelling and give lessons on what other writers can learn about fiction writing through the medium of comic books and the characters. But nobody quite got that. A few people did. Dal did. I know that.
Yeah, it's the niches, right? The people who are looking for specific things that are
Yes.
gonna be into it.
And unfortunately, there's so many people trapped in the idea of you are in a niche, and going outside of that niche means you're going to leave your comfort zone. I think there's a fear that it's somehow going to destroy what you're doing. If you're writing in one genre, another genre could be overload of information or change you somehow. It will change you, but I guarantee it will make you better, because the greats, and there aren't many of them left, will all say read everything, and we are not reading everything.
No, we are not. No, we are not. We're hardly reading anything at all. Like some of us, I'm guilty of having very little time to read, and I feel guilty about that. But at the same time, I do have time to catch up on my shows. So I'm just anyway.
Yeah,
That's the dance, right?
it is the dance. I spent time while learning going into First of all, I had a huge list of books from Saul Stein, and on top of that, I spent time reading, going into like a used bookstore, anything that was like a prize-winning novel or New York Times bestseller. I compared what they had in common, and just looking at those things in various genres, and in straight fiction, because straight fiction encompasses a variety of things that would be wouldn't necessarily come under one genre, but they have various genres within that, but their wordsmith abilities are just better, so they put it under fiction. But there's a lot of stuff that you can find that's really well written and
Sure.
will show you that you can up your level on that genre and become a better writer and still have success.
Do you still make requested content on your channel? Like
I
old stuff?
I'm not making it now. I would, but I think it would greatly depend on what the request was and how it fits in with what the audience currently is.
Sure.
Or, the audience may change. It's changing all the time.
Yeah. Should be like a majority thing, right?
Yeah.
If everybody's asking for something, then you got to make it. Every YouTube channel needs a cool name. Why Story Detective and why the tech part of detective?
Because I also incorporated tech reviews and gadget reviews like the lightsabers. And I had some marketing people, even a friend who's very into marketing, tell me, get rid of that. That's just going to confuse people. And I thought, from a standpoint of marketing, if you're doing content creation, that might be true. But I'm looking at this as a small business. And in a small business, you diversify. And if I'm just relying on AuthorTube, I'm never going to get anywhere in terms of the numbers that YouTube requires.
Yeah. It's funny though too, because like you try these different things. Well, the Story Detective thing, with it being spelled like that, my gut was what he was saying too. Like that's going to confuse people, but it stands out. Like it looks like a typo at first glance, so like it makes you read it. You know what I mean? And so like in that way, it's recognizable everywhere as purely yours. It actually is good marketing, is what I'm trying to say.
I think if you watch the channel, from a marketing standpoint, I think if there's anything that you can fit under the umbrella of whatever you believe your brand or your content should be, and I've done Star Wars, so obviously lightsabers is a thing. Tech helps writers because there's a lot of tech out there, and experimenting with different keyboards is something
we're using a lot of it to do our thing these days.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. The tech side, man, that's a huge. When people talk about being an author, especially a self-published author, they don't talk about how many jobs you're actually doing. You know what I mean? You're not doing one job. You're doing like 19 jobs.
It's more prevalent now because of social media, and it forces you to leave your comfort zone to some degree, whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
But it's all a part of growth. And I think one storytelling medium like videos helps your writing because you're editing and you're doing it in a different format. But it still has those parallels.
And on the same vein as having things on your channel that like are just like adjacent to what you're doing, the latest thing on my channel is these Breaking Bad commentary videos where I just like watch an episode and talk over it. And I love that show, and I know it so well. And I adopted a lot of my writing techniques from that writer's room's writing techniques, from interviews that they have and footage of them in their writer's room. Like I'm learning from these guys. These guys know what they're doing.
And that can help.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it absolutely did. It got my first draft done. So yeah. With the comics, the books, YouTube, now the lightsaber-centered website, not to mention the developmental editing, which you also do apparently, what does your daily workload look like? And when do you find time to relax? Like how much work do you actually do in a day?
I think as far as relaxing and self-care, I think it's almost mislabeled. I think self-care and taking a break is still part of the creative process, because if you don't give your mind time to rest or refuel that creative well by reading or watching your favorite movies or TV shows, you're going to lead to burnout and you get tired mentally. Eventually, I think that's what leads to writer's block, because you hit those plateaus where you're just not coming up with anything. You haven't replenished the input.
For sure. For sure. I want to take a second to go back to the chat here. We've got some new folks in. Jennifer, hello.
Hey, Jim.
I've been hearing this a lot from my guests, from my viewers rather. If you are subscribed and you have notifications turned on, apparently there's two different kinds of notifications. There's like a sometimes one and an every times one, so you might have to go into your settings. But
Yeah.
also, if you go into the playlist where I've lined up all of the episodes, you can go to each individual episode and actually set a reminder. It's not the same thing as a notification. It'll actually tell you 30 minutes ahead of time, hey, it's about to start in 30 minutes. And then it'll tell you when it starts, it tells you again. So those reminders are way more reliable. So if you want to try those out. That's from previous conversation. Hello. Hello. Okay, agree, Robert. Okay, yep. Yeah, notifications have been late. That's why Barrett comes early. I don't know how Barrett is so omnipresent. He's everywhere. I love it. It's crazy. Every stream I go to, he's in there, and I'm like, how did you get here before me? This is crazy. All right. So how do you maintain pacing amongst so many different projects?
I don't try to work on everything at once. I have a calendar that I've recently started using where if I can check off 2, maybe 3 tasks per day, that's great. But there's other times when something will be flowing better, or I just need to get this project done, like clear my desk of this before I work on that type of thing. And that might take all day or maybe all week working on one thing. So you break it up with prioritizing and whatever is feeding you and where your mind is at, I think.
Sure. Yeah, just kind of go where the creative juice is flowing, get each thing done
Yeah.
in its entirety, and then move on to the next. Organized. I like it. I can only assume out of everything you do, performing developmental edits on novels for novel writers has to be the hardest and most time consuming. How do you get started? Because I can wrap my head around doing a developmental edit on my own book. I can't necessarily get my head around doing one on a book I've never read before, like just diving into it. So what does that process look like? Do you read the whole thing first and then go back and tackle the edit? Do you tackle the edit from the beginning? What's your process like?
Well, it's a lot of questions rolled into one.
I'm sorry.
But to kind of take it in some kind
we'll
of
break
order,
it up. Yeah.
when I look at something that's like a sample chapter or a short story, sometimes I'll just dive in and edit as I go. Sometimes I'll read it all. But when you're coming up with something as long as a novel, you can't give the kind of notes that I would give on a short story throughout. You have to read it all and then keep track of where the problems are and make notes and build on that at the end.
Yeah.
So what was some of the beginning questions? There were some interesting things.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So how do you, how do you get started was part of it. Do you read the whole thing first, or do you do the edit as you read? Like what's that whole like kind of actual process like?
The process differs from writer to writer, but
Oh.
actually to go back on the one point of being the hardest thing, actually, no, it's the easiest thing.
Really?
Working on my own stuff is hard because that's where I have
Really?
the most, I'm too close to it sometimes. And I think we all are. When I look at somebody else's work, I can see the problems or the triumphs, and I can actually break it down much easier. So taking a break sometimes from my own and editing somebody else's piece actually helps gear me up for issues that I may not be seeing in my own. I think in teaching, we learn.
Yeah, I agree. That's crazy though. The developmental edit being, I guess it makes sense. Like you say, you're not close to it. That it's something that you're detached from, so you can come to it more objectively, and see it for what it is. It's just the task of like taking on an entire novel and pacing issues, things like that. But anyway, I'm a first time author, so that just shows my naivete, my inexperience.
I think with time, when you get better at craft, then the craft principles, they don't really change. I mean, there's a lot of craft fundamentals, and then there's opinions about everything, tons of stuff. And if you look at the fundamentals, as I've often said, it's like you can give 100 artists the same paintbrush, and what they put on the page will vary by slight degrees and large degrees, but it's still the same brush that they're holding in their hand. It's their vision and the way they apply those techniques that count, but the fundamental nature of it is the same, because craft is flexible. And if you think, oh, this is a hard, fast rule and it's not going to work for me, that's just because you have the wrong teacher, or maybe you're still early in your process and you haven't put it together and figured out that, yeah, I can apply this. It's actually elevating me rather than holding me back.
What's the timeline usually like on one of these edits for a novel? I mean, I guess it depends on word count, but
it varies. I try never to take on more than I can handle, or if it's going to interfere with my own work, which is the priority. But I'll ask, what the timeline is. And if it's a timeline I can manage, if it's a short one, then I will try to get it done in the amount of time if I can do it. If I have more time and the timeline is longer, or they don't have a timeline, then obviously I can give it more thought, more notes, and they'll get a better... if anybody's seen my texts or emails or notes, they understand that it's sometimes very large. So
very thorough, very thorough.
The more time I have, the more thorough the process is going to get.
What are some of the base level key writing fundamentals that a majority of writers miss or lack in their books? Maybe they're too close to it, excuse me. The things that you're bound to find in a first-time writer's novel.
They're almost always the same. There's variations on it, but almost everyone misses the establishing of something up front, like the character, the scene, the details that's around them that can anchor the reader into their world. That's pretty much universal. Everybody, even some, unfortunately, that have went and spent thousands of dollars for editors, will come back and they won't have any of these things up front. And I'm like, man, you need to get your money back. Because they don't understand craft, or they're just interested in a paycheck, and they're smoothing over your writing, and they're not actually helping you.
They're giving you a line edit at best, right?
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
Your grammar and punctuation.
At best, yes. That's pretty much what they do, in spite of what they tell you.
I'm probably coming to you for my developmental edit. You've been very vocal about how messed up the system is in traditional publishing. There is the rare success story, of course, that everything went smoothly for them. But for the majority of folks, they find the process of publishing through a traditional publishing house to be very grueling and in many cases hopeless. And the same can be said for comic book publishers, maybe even more so. Yet I know that those same comic book publishers complain about their sales numbers, and they fire writers before they can, pick up steam with the book. You and Barrett talked a little bit about that on that interview as well. You can find that in the downstairs, everybody. So in your opinion, what's the solution look like? Like, if you were the CEO of a major comic book or book publisher and you could make changes, what magic wand would you wave to fix this and get us on the right track?
I don't think it would matter if I were the CEO or if somebody else was. I guess it would matter in terms of their knowledge of craft and all of that. But it's like politics. You can run as many things up the flagpole as you like, and their bottom line is making money and doing things in the most expedient fashion possible. And that's corporate America. And that's why I don't really care for corporations, because they're coming out with a product, not thinking about the creator. You're either churning it out for them or you're not. And that's why you really have to be good going in, because as they distill things and homogenize it more and more, you have to be better just to get your foot in the door. And if you're lucky enough to get your foot in the door in the past, then you're learning as you go, but you're always learning. They're not going to do it for you. And it seems like more and more they're not even really working with writers to help them become better. So you have the people that are already good at craft, or the people that might eventually become good at craft, and then you have everybody else that's just thrown into the meat grinder, and it's not helping. More is more, and if they could come out with more good stories and actually have somebody who would work with people on some level, any level for that matter, it would greatly increase their sales. But they're always concerned about what they can hold in the palm of their hand, and that's usually a very minute amount. That's why the 12 great writers that they have in their stable will get all the attention and nobody else.
You ever think about opening up your own publishing house, starting one up?
I have, and I've already started some things in motion. With the move coming up this year, it's going to be a bit. Probably by the end of the year, I'll have more ducks, or most of the ducks, in order, and more on that once I develop that. But I have to get my own writing in shape, and some things. There's various things to come into play. I don't think it's good to jump in before I have certain other things in play. Otherwise, one thing is just going to interfere with the other.
Fair enough. Yeah. Don't jump the gun. Do it
Yeah.
right, especially if the whole point is to do it right, right?
Yeah, and doing it right means helping people get the kind of help that they need, and not smoothing over their work and hope that it's going to sell, because as a small company you would go under fast. The big companies have lots of money and they're big name writers to recoup any losses, and losses can be a tax write-off. But when you're a small business, you don't want to keep going down that route, because you need success more than failure.
Yeah, for sure. So, along those same lines with the publishing house and everything, I'm curious about your thoughts on AuthorTube. You've been on AuthorTube a few years now. There's AuthorTube, there's BookTube. Booktubers are looking for great books to read and review, but they're only watching other booktubers who are reviewing the same books that they are. AuthorTubers want readers to buy their books, but we spend our time talking to other AuthorTubers. So why the disconnect? How do we kind of bridge that gap? I've started reaching across the aisle, but so far I'm not getting a very warm reception.
I'm not sure anybody's going to get a warm reception, because we've become.
What happened?
I have a video coming out about this, so there's a lot of information there that would take time to go into here. But essentially, it's because the platform was started by people who were YA fantasy authors. They become the biggest names on the platform, so that gets all the energy and the algorithm, so everybody else gets cut out. I am actually going to work on, probably coming by the end of the month, a tag for a writer tube, something that's beyond AuthorTube. And I'm not trying to be the savior of the community. It's what you put into the community that you get back. And I think that there's so many people that have become gun shy because of AuthorTube. Well, I have a writing channel, but I can't talk about writing. I have a journey, but I can't share that journey with you because I'm not qualified. But aren't you learning something as you go along this journey? Aren't you sharing anything that you've learned? And how is that going to affect readers or people that might want to buy your book, because you're like, I'm not qualified, So your book's not going to sell. You're building yourself up for failure almost.
I think folks have become very much afraid of the stigma going around AuthorTube of people posing as or presenting themselves as experts when they are not, and giving writing advice that they have no business giving. And I get that, but folks are missing that you don't have to give writing advice. You can just share your experience and what works for you. And what you're ultimately doing is saying, hey, like, I had trouble figuring it out. This is what I've figured out for me. And then if you're still having trouble figuring it out, then try what I tried. Maybe it'll work for you. Maybe not. Try something else. Like, that's the idea, is to just kind of put resources out there, right?
I'm hoping to branch out to bring in the pockets of various genres, but if those genres don't speak out about their genre, then it's going to be the same thing, where whoever's actually talking about their genre and their writing is going to become the thing that the algorithm goes for. So if we start this, keep in mind that If you have a specific genre and you want to talk about that genre, make sure you do so that becomes part of the algorithm.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Now we're talking about sort of adjustments on AuthorTube, trying to like find happy mediums in places and all that. Along those same trains of thought, we're looking at social media, right? We're looking at Instagram, Facebook,
Mhm.
Twitter, TikTok. I'm going to be asking this question pretty much of all my guests this season because I want to know everyone's thoughts on this. We make them work as best as we can for us as authors, as writers. We're trying to reach readers. These social media platforms are not designed with the thought of authors meeting readers in
No, they're
mind.
not.
That's not what they're for. So we're trying our best with what we've got, but we don't have a great options in front of us. Then there's Readsy and Goodreads, which are close, but they're not quite right either. And I'm
Mhm.
trying to ask of everybody what they think the right way to go might be. What does a social media platform made for authors to meet readers or for readers to meet authors look like to
The
you?
platform is a huge problem because it's supposed to be for creators, but it's not. It also is a business run by a big company. And to get any favor from it, again, it comes back to the algorithm. And the algorithm has to be a variety of things. Otherwise, it's going to settle on that one thing, and we're going to have AuthorTube all over again, or some other platform that's the same thing. And they have so many hurdles for us to leap over at this point. And if you look at the hurdles that the community, all communities have their good and bad points, but AuthorTube again is an example, and this is probably going to hurt somebody's feelings out there. But if you look at AuthorTube and they're in that bubble where they can't read beyond their genre, they're afraid to talk out, they're not getting the help that they're looking for. And all of those people that are putting out the self-published books are kind of a variation on the same theme and the same story. It's just that it's a slightly different plot. And if it's not selling, it's because you're too insulated. And that's not to say that there's not good writers there. There's some very good writers. But again, it's about expanding yourself and stepping out and beyond your comfort zone and reading something besides the same things that your friends are recommending. You're looking for beta readers from the friends that are in the same basic category, the same level that you are, and you're getting the same advice. And so it's regurgitating into the same kind of stories. And I think if you expand and go beyond that, the sales will show itself, because Amazon is just realizing that you have a certain number of followers. So these people self-publish and put out a book, and like I said, they get a little pile of money from that. And if they can get thousands of people publishing more often as they keep pushing for, that's their business, and they'll get more money. But that gives you less time to prepare, less time to work on your craft, work on your novel. So it's just like a churning out process, and it's become a huge bubble that I think needs to break, and people need to think about themselves, not so much the business of Amazon, and not so much what's going on within your little circle. Because if you're all selling about the same amounts and doing the same things, there's no originality. Eventually it'll become homogenized, and Amazon will change again and again and again to whatever they feel is necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, in a lot of issues, you're prompted to vote with your wallet, right? Like, buy
Yeah.
what you want to read, buy what you want to intake, and just turn away anything that you just don't want to see more of.
Hmm.
Um, and and hopefully the river kind of like changes course, right?
Yeah, and also dig a little deeper into craft books. What's popular with like Save the Cat and some of the books that's going around. That again is coming from big corporations that have all that stuff distilled down to story beats. It's not so much craft or even structure; it's a form of structure
Yeah. Well, like
listed
anything
as.
else, you want to
Yeah,
go to multiple sources and not just like base it off of the one book, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So
All right, all right. I lost my interview document. Where is it? There it is. Okay, so what is it with I forgot this question was in here. What is it with you and not writing westerns? I'm not going to strong arm you on this, but I'm just curious what you feel is lacking in westerns that
um,
you don't want to have anything to do with.
I've read some really good westerns. Don't get me wrong. There's some that are really written by people that have researched or experts in the time, and they're really good. Most westerns become a shoot 'em up, and it's one gunfight after another,
Yeah,
and they're not really looking at the period. I just don't see that as something that I'd be interested in. It's sort of like writing an action story, and you're taking a formula from an action movie and coming up with one chase scene after another. That doesn't
sure.
interest me either.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Fast and Furious, right? So, because then you do have those great westerns, and then you have the ones where, like, just like you're talking about, it's just one shootout after another. But the shootouts aren't even exciting. They're just standing on opposite ends of something and just shooting at each other. It's usually pretty boring.
Exactly.
The great, westerns always have like that tension that builds and stretches, so it's really really tight before something crazy happens. Tombstone, famously,
Yeah.
just one of my favorites. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So many people, going back to comics for a moment, after learning of my love of comics, they tell me that they'd love to get into comics, but they have no idea where to start. There's so much, they feel lost, they feel overwhelmed. I always have a few go-to recommendations. Do you have any for like your big basic? I'm not going to make you go through the whole list because we're pressed for time, but a couple of your big recommendations for people who want to start out and haven't read comics before, and then maybe on the podcast we'll go through the entire list.
In terms of genre, I give it the same advice that I'd give anybody trying to do anything. You can go to something like Batman if you're into detective stories or crime and various characters, but read everything. Um, you're not going to know what they're going to hire you for because that's a big
That's a
trick.
good answer.
You go in there and some editor needs this done, and you're only interested in that. They're not going to hire you for work. And I think that's a key for comic books. Try to stay open, try to stay as broad as possible, and just keep plugging away because, like everything else, they all follow suit after one another. It's the same kind of corporate jargon and the same kind of stuff that's going to make it harder and harder for people because you have to know what you're doing going through the door because they want a fast success rate.
Sorry, there's a bug in here, like just like messing with me. Um, and it just keeps going by the camera, and I'm like, "What are you doing, dude?" Like,
I've had that happen.
it's like a little gnat. It's so annoying. All right, so we're gonna shift into the live chat Q&A. We've got a few questions in there. First, I want to throw up on the screen the comment of the week. We're gonna have one of these every week. This one comes from a live stream I did a few weeks ago, where I was talking about Dexter, one of my favorite shows that also had very, very horrible seasons thrown in there. And I was ranking the seasons. And this comment comes from Daniel Grimes, who says, "You're wrong. Season 2 isn't the second best season of the show. It's the best." And I responded to him very kindly in there about why he's wrong. But it really is really, really good. And it's very close to being the best. Comment of the week, Daniel Grimes. Leave a comment down below if you want to be featured on the comment of the week. Okay, we're going to go over here and let you guys be reminded of the next time you can see this guy on this channel. Alrighty, let's get into the live chat questions. First one up. If you could only give a new writer one piece of advice, what would it be? You've given out some gems in this episode already, but you may have already answered this, but go for it.
It's the same classic advice I've been giving. Read as widely as possible, view everything, take in everything, and keep experimenting, because you don't know what your magic wand is. And few people actually experiment enough to find it. That's why there's only so many greats, because the greats never stop learning and experimenting and taking it all in. So if you want to be a great writer, I think the separation comes in just the amount of knowledge that you're constantly putting into yourself, because the greats will say they never stop learning.
Yeah, that's right. And they also tell you, especially in the beginning, to steal from everybody. You read everything, steal from everybody. Like every single great author has said it, and I stand by that. I steal.
Every
from
great
everybody.
artist does too. You experiment with a style that's really influential to you, and you learn how to do that, and then you add something.
You develop your own over time as you
Exactly.
like. As it's just a hodgepodge of everybody you love, and you just create your own.
Everybody does it. Everybody does it.
Going back to the previous topic very quick, I just wanted to throw this up. Problem 1, the way AuthorTube gives writing advice is very basic. Problem 2, the audience believes that's all there is to writing, gets bored, and complains about generic AuthorTube videos. I agree. That's why I do fun stuff like this. All right. Let's see here. Number 2 was, another one from Barrett. Will you ever create a program or a nonfiction craft book?
It's in the works.
Oh, I feel like he knows these things ahead of time somehow, and just like tease people up for them, like he's an internet stalker. He knew that the answer to that question before he asked it. All right. Do you remember the first comic book title you read?
Yeah, it was Spider-Man, because I love the Spider-Man cartoon, and that just ignited my creativity. So I remember it was my mother who went into a little mom and pop store, and she came out with a Spider-Man book that had the Scorpion on the cover, because I thought the Scorpion was a great villain watching that old classic Spider-Man cartoon on TV. And I was like, oh my God, look at this. And then when I read it, there were so many different levels that were missing in the cartoon. I thought, I just want more. And then I started reading everything.
Yeah. Spider-Man was also my way in. My father was not a big reader, but he was a huge Spider-Man fan from back in his day. And when he saw that I was getting into the cartoon, same thing. He's like, "Oh no, you got to read the comics." And he took me to a comic shop, and it wasn't a comic shop actually. It was just a regular bookstore that they had a little rack, a little turn rack of comics near the register. And I just picked up a couple Spider-Man comics and just never stopped, man. He never put him back down.
As an interesting side note, most of the people that come to me and ask questions and say, how do you feel about this character doing blah, blah? It's all about the MCU. It's not about the comics. And when I talk about the characters in the comics, they're just like, huh?
Yeah.
Because that's where all the energy is going.
Yeah. The next question up was one by Richard Holiday, but he has asked it of you on Barrett's interview. So sorry, Richard, you're not getting one this episode. Nobody's going to answer your dumb pizza question on my premiere episode. Moving on. Next one up is, do you have any feelings on the discussion surrounding, I don't even know what that is, mouse being too graphic for teens?
Yes.
MAUS? What is this? Enlighten me.
It's a graphic novel that basically had mice, and it was about the Holocaust. And they're talking about things about the Holocaust being too graphic, because there were various things like a mouse depicted without any clothes, and they were saying it was naked and too graphic for children. It's like, come on.
Mice. They were mad that the mice were naked?
Yes.
They're not,
any excuse that they can come up with to ban books. I mean, we keep going through this.
It's about the Holocaust, and their complaint was that the mice didn't have pants on.
life goes in cycles. We first want to experience everything, and then we come back to this. Okay, certain stories are educational, certain stories meet this certain criteria.
It's so weird. It's so
It's
frustrating.
ridiculous.
It's so frustrating. People are just so weird these days. All
We
right.
need. My thought is, yes, we need to get beyond this whole regime
Yeah.
that's going on and move forward because it is ridiculous.
Agreed. Agreed. When is a writer ready to hire an editor? How many drafts and craft books?
It
A
depends.
specific number of craft books she wants to know.
I think when you feel you're ready, you could hire an editor, but also you would want to have enough understanding to know that what you're putting on the page is informed. You don't want to go out and hire an editor because you feel I have a draft of a book done, or 2 drafts or 3 drafts, and I need to self-publish, so it's time for an editor, and thinking that editor is going to solve your problems, because they won't.
He's gonna claim memory is the problem here. Get out of here. Everybody's sharing their first comic stories in here. This is awesome. It's a mouse.
Yes.
It's a fucking mouse. Dude, Donald Duck doesn't wear pants. I don't know. I don't get it. Okay.
Well, once they start going down this line, if they succeed in one thing, then they'll start, censoring everything. But that's always how it goes.
Would you ever write an isekai graphic novel? I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is?
I'm not quite sure what that is. As far as
All
graphic
right.
novels, I never say never, but
You're getting very niche there.
I am kind of beyond wanting to write a graphic novel at this point.
Yeah?
I am going to be helping a friend in the not too distant future who's written and drawn one, and he wants me to ink it. But I'm not going to come up with my own graphic novel anytime soon. I have too many other irons in the fire that interest me more. So,
Best era of Marvel Comics, in your opinion?
all eras have their specific things that are really good. I think we keep missing the point, though. Every era comes up with something and they start building steam with it, and it's like we could take comic books anywhere. It could be such a great alternative form of storytelling. And then what happens is the company, just drops the ball. It's like in the 90s, they had their great comic book explosion, and you could have done anything you wanted to, and you decided not to tell stories at all. You just put out crap after crap that was thinly spliced together. And
It was all about covers in the 90s for some reason. 90s were all about the covers. They wanted the covers to match up or to have variants of the covers.
Yeah, they wanted big action stories that had splash pages all over the place, and they upped the violence and they cut back on the plot. And where did that go for them? So keep that in mind. That alone is not enough if you don't have a character, and that character doesn't have interesting flaws and problems and things that people can relate to. Everything else is going to fall short because stories are about characters.
Do you have a graphic novel that you just can't stop rereading? You just reread it over and over, like every so often? What have you read the most?
The first Dark Knight by Frank Miller.
That's a good one. I read that one a lot too. I read The Long Halloween every Halloween. And I read The Crow every Halloween.
Interesting.
Yeah, I read those two over and over a lot. I think
Frank Miller's work just inspires me because his storytelling is the kind of storytelling that I learned. So if I want a refresher in terms of good storytelling through comics, I will often go back to Frank Miller's work. Whether it's 300 or The Dark Knight, those are really good storytelling examples through that medium.
I love The Dark Knight Returns. I don't reread it every year, but I do reread it quite often. I like a lot of the Sin City ones too. I read several of the Sin City ones over and over too. There's just some, and his Daredevil run too. Now that I think of it, is another one that I read a lot. Yeah, Frank Miller is one of those that just.
Yeah,
he gets stuck in like the back of your brain and like scratches at you, and you're like, "What is that?"
There's other things like The Watchmen, and anything written by Alan Moore, of course, is going to be a great story.
Oh yeah, for sure.
V for Vendetta, I just picked up, and I've been meaning to get back to reading that.
I like that one a lot. And you know the movie gets a bad rap, but I feel it's underrated. I like that movie a lot. I feel it kind of captured the spirit at least of the graphic novel. It's sad that Alan Moore's never going to watch any of his adaptations. I don't know. I feel like he might have liked that one.
He
Sin
may have,
City.
but the industry hasn't been kind to him either, so he's a bit
No,
jaded.
yeah. I mean, look at League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. The way that they just
Yeah.
destroyed his one of his masterpieces. Like, come
Or
on,
how
man.
DC said the rights was going to revert back to him once the book was out of print, but they never let it go out of print.
I
And
mean,
they just let
even
it go on long enough that they could keep the rights and integrate it now into the rest of superherodom.
the interesting thing about him is that they keep throwing him curveballs, and he keeps like just slamming them out of the park anyway. Like what happened on Watchmen, where he wanted to use the old Charleston characters, right?
Mhm.
And they're like, "Nope, you can't use them. We got plans for them to do this other stupid thing that we're gonna do." And he's like, "Fine, I'll just make up like new versions of all of them and just do it anyway." And he did it. And it was probably better for it. Probably better for it. Like the, oh no, oh Richard, see this is one of those things, Richard. Just like pineapple on pizza. What is? I feel bad. I feel really bad, Richard. No,
It
no.
had its moments as a film,
I
but I can't watch it and
Swaps.
say this is one
Alan
I'm going
Moore
to
swaps
return
thing
to.
was yeah. No, me neither. It's not even close. It's not even close. Yeah, it was. Isn't that sad? Don't understand how people don't understand the horrifically flawed nature of the Watchmen characters. Yeah, I love Watchmen. That's good stuff.
Yeah,
Watchmen's the
and
best.
that's part of why they were so popular, because they were so horrifically flawed.
Yeah, yeah. Like people relate to that stuff. You know,
Yeah,
it's no matter how horrible, it's nice to see yourself in a character.
yeah, that's the whole key right there.
A couple. We have a couple minutes left here. I'm going to go back to one of the questions that we haven't gotten to yet, which is you've spoken about how much nuance is lost in movie adaptations of novels. What are some that you can point to as being some of the best adaptations, or provided we allow for things needing to change for the medium and all that, an adaptation can still capture the spirit of the original work, like I feel about V for Vendetta. What what are some of your favorites?
V for Vendetta was a good one.
Yeah,
Watchmen wasn't bad. The ending was
Watchmen
different,
wasn't bad,
but they
but
had
it
a good,
worked. It
they had a good
worked.
impactful ending for the film.
Yeah,
Same with 300. Now Zack Snyder, people can say what they want about him, but if you give him the right story, that dark kind of story, and
yeah.
Frank Miller does that, The Watchmen does that, so give him one of those stories and he'll do a great adaptation. Those are two of my
Agreed.
favorites.
Agreed. Same here, and both very great. Especially 300. You could go panel for panel through that sucker, and see the whole
Yeah.
movie right there.
He even said when he was filming it and he ran into problems, he had flipped through the graphic novel and said, "Let's see what Jesus does here."
I wish more people would do that. It's so simple. It's right there. Just pick it up and flip through it, you
Yes.
idiot. I love it. Okay. And okay, so final question before we wrap up. What plans do you have for Story Detective's future on YouTube going forward?
I think it's going to be a bit of a slow burn with some planning, but I'm going to focus on the quality over quantity. I think I'm going to do like either some longer videos or multi-part videos that take the in-depth stuff even further. So when you're watching it, it's like a little bit of a series. You can put it together in something that would be like a little mini series or TV show or docu kind of thing.
I love it. I look forward to it. I look forward to it. I'll be one of the ones watching.
I appreciate
For
that.
sure. So everybody, it is Robert Jones, Story Detective. I'll give you the floor one more time, and you let us know, what you have coming up, what you want people to keep an eye out for.
Well, I have in the works a series that's going to be probably at least 3 parts on Lejos Igri, and that's the art of dramatic writing. And if you haven't read that book, I suggest that everyone does, because it's also another master. And while the greats, have a lot in common, seeing their different approaches will show you that craft is kind of malleable and flexible, and you can come up with your own methodology once you get a handle on it. It's not strict. It's not a set in stone kind of thing. No part of it is that. But when you get the fundamentals, those brushes, then you have to practice and learn how to use them in a variety of ways.
All right. Amen, brother. I love it. Thank you for being here. This was great. Stick around. Don't go anywhere. We're going to do the podcast in a minute. For everybody in the chat, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for participating in everything. You guys are awesome. Please come back next Sunday. We're going to have T.E. Butcher on here. He's going to be talking about how his military experience influences the sci-fi military stories that he writes. And for more with Robert Jones, come back on Thursday for his episode of the podcast, which we're going to record here. It's 5 o'clock. It's been an hour. Thank you guys so much. And we'll catch you next time. Come back on Tuesday for Breaking Bad as well. We have Breaking Bad on Tuesday. Peace out.